power, control, abuse, gaslighting, fear. Tonight, we are talking about the types of abuse that impact men and women who are in domestic violence situations. Welcome back to PsychSpeak. I'm Shahidrah Cowgill.
Mandalin Wright.
And tonight we're doing another Psych Rotations episode on the series Maid. Our hope is to share information, offer resources. Welcome to PsychSpeak. Let's get right into the show. So Mandalin, hey, the last time that we were together, we talked about the 7 reasons why people stay in a domestic violence situation. Tonight, we're talking about the 7 types of abuse, and it kind of flows with the impact that the show Maid, has had on both of us. Can you share a little bit about why we're talking about this tonight?
Yeah, abuse is about power and control, and it manifests in different ways. In the first episode, she's there and she's talking about how she's abused, but she doesn't see it as abuse because she actually said he never laid a hand on me. So what was I supposed to report? A lot of people don't realize that there are different types of abuse, and they were all valid and dangerous and traumatic. So that's why we're talking about it today, so that we can highlight this. And I want to kind of reiterate what we talked about last week, and we'll one more time at the end of the show. There is a hotline that you can call. It's 1-800-799-7233. That's the domestic abuse hotline. And also reminding everybody about the My Plan app, which is a way for people who are in a domestic abuse situation. You can create a plan. There's resources on there. So I just want to start with that, of course. And of course, the first type of abuse, will start obvious, is physical. This is the one that everybody this is obvious, if you have, this is what people think of when they think of domestic violence.
Right. And when you say people, not just from an individual standpoint, but from a societal standpoint. And I think throughout the show, we see the stance of family members, social workers, the judge, the legal teams, the people that are, in fact, supposed to be in place to recognize the dynamics of what abuse are, actually create an environment that makes those who need to get the support and who need leniency, it makes it really difficult for them to define the emotional abuse part. So we're talking about physical abuse. What are some of the telltale signs of physical abuse?
Yeah, again, this one is very obvious and what people think of when they think of domestic violence. Pulling your hair, punching, slapping, kicking, biting, choking, smothering. One that people might not think of is being forbidden to eat or sleep because that's hurting you physically. Weapons, firearms, knives, harming children or pets. Reckless driving. So if you're in a car and someone is driving crazy and you're telling them, I don't feel safe, I'm scared, that's harming you physically as well. Abandoning you in an unfamiliar place. So if they just say, get out of the car, and they leave you, you could be harmed physically there as well. Trapping you in your home or preventing you from leaving. Throwing objects actually at you. Denying you medical treatment or preventing you from taking your medication if you have medication that you need to take that's prescribed from a doctor, preventing you from doing that.
Yeah. So I don't want to ignore the fact that even just reading that list can be triggering for some. And so this is just a little bit of a disclaimer. As we are talking through some of the characteristics of these different types of abuse, we want to encourage you to take good care of yourself during this episode. This may be one that if you are a clinician, that this is really helpful to reiterate some of the lessons that you've learned and some of the things that you're seeing coming in and out of your office spaces. However, if you have been impacted by physical abuse, a lot of times this pokes on the trauma injuries and the wounds that manifest in addition to the physical injuries that can come from physical abuse. And so I just want to highlight, take good care of yourself. Even when watching the show, to be just mindful that as you're allowing these images to come in your eyes and the sounds to come into your ears, that it may poke on some of your own stuff. What's the second type of abuse that has come up?
One, a little more subtle, but just as serious, is emotional and verbal abuse. Together. This is the one that is highlighted in the show. This is one that's not so much highlighted when it comes to domestic violence. People don't think that they're being abused because they aren't hit. This is a little more subtle. So
it can be harder to identify, even if it is right in front of your face. The subtlety of it is also the damaging part, because there may be people who are witnessing it that don't acknowledge that that could be emotional abuse.
Yeah. And again, going back to what we said in the beginning, it's about power and control. And this is the way that it's manifesting. It's different. It's non-physical, but it's still used to control, to isolate, to frighten. It's still just as powerful as the physical. This includes name calling, insulting, constant criticism, acting possessive or refusing to trust you, acting jealous all the time. That's part of emotional isolation. So we did touch on this in the last podcast about how they want to isolate you, because you away from your friends and family who are kind of seeing everything that's happening, kind of pull you aside and get you away from that situation. That's very threatening to the abuser. It makes you easier to control if you're isolated. Monitoring activities with or without your knowledge. So where you're going, who you're with, what and how you spend your time. Controlling what you wear, as your makeup, your hair, your outfit. Humiliation, especially in front of other people, talking down to you, putting you down, humiliating you in a lot of different ways.
And we see that show up in the show, mm-hmm. right? And I think one of the episodes that's coming to mind is when Alex has returned home and her dad is at the dinner table with her ex-boyfriend, and that the boyfriend gets up and he tells her to sit down at the table after she said, "I'm not hungry, and I don't want to." And it becomes a very threatening situation. And it's aggressive. Mm-hmm. And yet you can even see the dad get uncomfortable, but he doesn't say anything.
Mm-hmm. And carrying that on, he actually, I don't know if it was the dad or the ex-boyfriend that forced a prayer too before they eat. She's like, hold hands, let's pray. And she's like, not even really wanting to touch anybody, but she knew she had to because of the whole control of that situation. Yeah.
So in that scene, it really depicted her lifespan of experiences with abuse, right? So on the front end, her experience and exposure to abuse came from her dad and her mom's relationship.
Right.
Even if she wasn't completely aware of it at that time. And it's like the times were intersecting with real time. Her boyfriend or her ex-boyfriend at that time was really activating the same type of atmosphere.
Yeah, seeing it mirrored side by side. Mm-hmm. And I do want to kind of pause here. The next one is gaslighting. That happened a lot, especially with her dad in that last episode, where she's like, "I need you to stand up for me. I need you to, you were abusive to mom," and he was just like, "I don't remember that. I don't know what you're talking about." He gaslighted her a lot. That was a really good example of that. And everybody's heard this term gaslighting. It comes from a 1938 play and a 1944 film called Gaslight. It was about a husband who manipulates his wife into thinking that she's crazy by slowly changing the lights of their gas lamps. And so that's where the term gaslighting comes from. And everybody's heard this term, but it's the definition of it pretending to not understand or confused, when they're listening, like, I don't understand what you're saying, or I'm really confused by what you're saying. Questioning your facts, your events or sources, trivializing your needs or feelings, denying statements or promises. I never said that. I don't know what you're talking about. I never promised that. I never said that. Lying. The whole point is to make you question your reality and cause confusion. A lot of times just projecting onto you what they're doing. If they're accusing you of cheating, they're likely doing everything that they're accusing you of. Gaslighting is a big one, and that is definitely emotional abuse.
Yeah. So gaslighting is really shrouded in manipulation and deception.
Very subtle.
Really meant to keep you off balance and uncertain about your own thoughts, uncertain about your own choices, and really, in a sense, making you dependent on them to fill in the gaps of the story that's not true. And I think a lot of times when a person is in a situation, they lose a portion of themselves. Mm-hmm. And it becomes really hard to connect with other people. It really becomes difficult to trust reality. Outside of that relationship, you begin to question everything because of the impact of the abuse. It really is an injury to the brain. And like I said, a person really can lose their identity in the midst of, and we do see Alex lose her identity when she is back in this relationship that she was bold enough to try to get out of and leave.
Yeah, and I think too, it's very damaging to the self, because you start to think, am I too sensitive? Did I make a big deal out of that? That wasn't that deal, because you're getting told you're too sensitive, you're too everything, you're too much this, you're too much that, when really you're just expressing your needs. You're expressing what your wants are, and it's too much for the abuser to be accountable. For what they need to be accountable for.
I want to pause right here and highlight that these dynamics do not just exist in dating, romantic, or intimate relationships. Okay. So the relationships where these types of characteristics can show up in friendships. It can show up in family relationships, sibling relationships, parent to child.
Self-gaslighting is a thing.
Self-gaslighting is a thing. And I'll say a lot of times when I'm working with clients who are battling themselves, a lot of those questions came from other relationships where that mindset has been planted in. Mm-hmm. And so it not only comes externally, it then migrates to be internal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Also, I know we talked about in the physical part, threatening pets or hurting pets or your children, but in the emotional and verbal part, even threatening that can be very damaging and very scary. If you are a dog or a cat person and they're threatening that they're going to hurt your animal, or they're being very graphic about what they're going to do, that can be very upsetting.
Absolutely.
Or your children as well. Damaging your belongings. This includes walls, doors, your objects. If they're punching the walls or they're throwing, and it did show in the first episode about him throwing things. He didn't throw it at her. It was pretty near her. I don't know if he was trying to hit her or not, but it was pretty close to it. But if you have people that just get really angry and damage your property, punching the walls and kicking doors and things like that, or straight up breaking something that's important to you, or even not important to you, just damaging objects around you. Blaming you for their abusive behavior. Well, I'm getting mad because you made me mad. You ticked me off. You shouldn't have said that. So yeah, blaming you for that.
Yeah. I know I've probably said this before, but anytime blame shows up, whether it is blame being inflicted from another person, or if it is self-blame, either way, it's a dead-end street, right? There is no creativity to solve the issue at hand. You really get zeroed in on that person being the problem. So if it's self-blame, it becomes a microscopic view of all the things that are wrong and why things are your fault. If it is outward blame, that same characteristic gets applied to the people who you're in relationship with. And so if we misdirect blame or responsibility, then we don't have to figure it out. We don't have to come up with a resolution. It's that person's issue and they need to fix it. Or if it's my issue, I need to fix it. And that can be so overwhelming. And it's a lot of pressure, especially within relationship. It may not just be you. It's the dynamics that exist within, any type of relationship, but specifically as we're talking about abusive relationships.
Right. And also blaming you for cheating, or worse, actually cheating themselves and blaming you that they cheated.
Yeah.
It's your fault. You're not wanting to have sex with me, so I had to find somebody else who would. Blaming that other person for infidelity is another one. And also telling a person you'll never find anybody better than me. Nobody is going to love you like I do. I put up with you. You're lucky to be with me. Like those kind of things.
Yeah. So I want to just interject here because I feel like there is another layer to this. I think you mentioned it just a little bit ago. But in the show, we see her try to launch a business. Mm-hmm. And in that time, she has a cell phone. She has acquired a car, even if it was gifted to her. There were things that allowed her to activate independence. And then slowly but surely, that independence began to be stripped away. Mm-hmm. So even by suggestion, do you really even need that phone? You're not really getting any calls. Mm-hmm. Your business isn't flourishing. So it becomes like this undermining of anything that is potentially going to allow you to advance and allow you to escape a situation on your own accord. And it is a shift in energy when it comes to control. And so that can be one of those subtle ways with abuse. And I think even at one point, without her knowledge, I think she's sleeping, he takes the car back to the guy and said, well, you didn't need the car anyway. You're here, you're watching our daughter, and where are you going? And so on a small scale, it can happen very subtly. And then all of a sudden, big changes that took so long to finally help you get back on your feet, just in a moment's notice, it gets stripped away. And you feel like, I think this is when we see her go into a deep depression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which was that was beautiful imagery, that depression.
Yeah.
The way they did that. It was really heartbreaking to see. She worked so hard to get her phone, her job, her car, her connections, and to lose all that and have
in a very short time period.
Yeah, it happened very quickly, but it was quick. It was quick but subtle too.
Right.
Like I think at one moment it's like she stood there and realized, oh my gosh,
how did I get here?
How did I get here? How did I get back here?
Yeah. I think at some point we'll do a full episode on severe depression.
Yeah.
Because I think we mentioned that in the last episode, and I do want to dig a little bit deeper into that. But let's keep going with the types of abuse. What else stands out to you as another type of abuse?
So the next one that I have is sexual abuse. This is control over physical and sexual intimacy, non-consensual and forced. So forcing you to dress in a way that you're uncomfortable with. We talked about that with the emotional abuse too. But this is making you dress in a sexy way that you just are not comfortable with. Forcing or manipulating into sex or sex acts, even if you're sick, you're tired, or worse yet, if you were physically injured by something that they've done and still forcing you to have sex. So without consent, strangling or restraining, holding you down, hurting with weapons or objects, involving other people without your consent, ignoring your feelings if you say, I'm not comfortable with this, I don't consent to this, completely ignoring you, and forcing you to watch porn or to make it yourself. All this is forced and non-consensual.
Yeah. So Thank you for sharing those characteristics. Sexual abuse is another form of extreme physical abuse. And I think having the distinction with any type of sexual assault, abuse, molestation, we hear all of these terms, but it is a violation of a person's body and a person's um, control over what belongs to them. And we started off by saying abuse overall is about power and control. And one of the worst ways to have power and control stripped away is through this type of abuse.
Definitely. So, and just kind of going on with that sexual coercion. So, saying you owe me because I gave you that gift, or I've done certain things for you, so I am owed. Giving you drugs to kind of, loosen you up, drugs or alcohol, or telling you to prove your love to me, guilting you into it. Acting sad or angry or resentful when you say no, and continuing even after you're saying no. Furthermore, kind of going on with reproductive coercion, refusing to use a condom or birth control, just flat out refusing that. Lying about birth control methods,
Wow.
withholding money for birth control.
Those are big.
Also, threatening violence if you don't agree to end a pregnancy or continue a pregnancy. I don't know that any of this, well, actually, this was kind of shown in the show. She talked about when she found out she was pregnant with Maddie, he wanted her to have an abortion. And
Yeah.
he that's the first time she said that she saw him really become that mask came off and he was really angry.
Yeah. So I think some of this kind of plays in when we look at the characters in the show. He obviously had some type of connection to people in his family who were willing to fork up money to activate these moments of control to help him activate more of a level of abuse over her. And so there can be support from others in these abusive dynamics, and it can add insult to injury.
Further isolating the person being abused.
Especially if that person doesn't have the resources to fight back.
Right. Absolutely. Which kind of goes into financial abuse, which you touched on a little bit when she lost everything. He was controlling all of that. With financial abuse, it's allowing but closely monitoring your, allowing an allowance, basically. You have an allowance, but it's going to be closely monitored. Depositing your check with money that you make into account that you can't access. Preventing you from viewing or accessing bank accounts. Stopping you from working, which is what he was doing to her. Limiting hours or getting you fired or forcing you only to do certain jobs. That's all financial abuse. Maxing out your credit cards without your permission, not paying your credit card balance. Basically anything that harms your credit score. That definitely financial abuse. Stealing money from your friends or your family. Taking money from your kids. If they have little, their little piggy banks or their things without permission. Taking their money. And living at home but refusing to work or to help you with household things, and refusing to provide money for necessary things or shared expenses.
Yeah, so that shows up big time.
Yeah.
Where he comes home with a case of beer and she said, well, we need food, we need milk, we need the essentials for the house.
Yeah, we got kids, gotta eat.
And essentially he says, figure it out. After he says, come home, I got us. I'm willing to work 2 jobs. I'm willing to go above and beyond. And unfortunately, the level of those stressors lead him back into a cycle of drinking. And then that abuse cycle, the intensity, the severity of it, it becomes glaringly clear.
Absolutely. The last one I have is stalking. So showing up, stalking is just showing up unwanted, uninvited,
Unannounced, uninvited.
just
Yeah.
showing up. Sending gifts, emails, voicemails, text messages that are unwanted. Leaving gifts that are unwanted, just leaving gifts everywhere. Calling and hanging up, or calling your friend or family or your boss and harassing them. Using social media to track activities, and waiting around where you spend time, just kind of waiting for you to show up. Stalking, definitely a form of abuse as well.
Yeah. And I want to highlight that stalking can very easily turn into something that gets activated, like physical abuse or violence.
Especially if you're
I do believe that you can activate legal action or, proof that someone is stalking you. So getting a restraining order or protective order to make sure that this person is not near your property and staying at a distance, and also making it so that they cannot approach you. And I think a lot of people who get recommended, restraining orders or protective orders, they think it doesn't do anything. And being able to be proactive and reporting, you don't know who else you're saving, from another person who may be subject to be a victim, of this person who is enthralled with you.
Absolutely, and reporting is really important. That was shown early on in the show, that she was trying to represent herself legally. And this, did you report any of this? Did you document any of this? No.
Very true.
So I do want to talk about documentation a little bit.
Do it.
So any of this abuse, if it's happening to you, keep a journal. Someplace where you can keep it safe. Writing statements that were made by you and also the abuser before, during, and after what had happened. Recording dates and times and descriptions. If there was a fit that was thrown and furniture's turned over, or broken things or holes in the wall, take pictures if you can of that. And also documenting injuries, no matter how small they are. Take pictures of those if you can, even if they're tiny. Seek medical help, because that will be documented as well. So if you need medical attention, don't hesitate to go there, and file a report with the police when it's safe to do so, to make sure that is all documented.
Yeah. I don't want to neglect the fact that sometimes other people do witness what is happening. And so you can actually request that they write something on your behalf. And in certain situations, that person who may witness certain behavior, they may be a character witness for you, or just to be able to say, on this date, I was present and this is what I saw transpire. And truth is really important. So being honest, but being very direct about what types of things you saw and how it was activated. Of course, if there are recordings or videos, we all have spy cams in our pocket attached to our phones that can record audio and visual interactions between, really people who are experiencing abusive relationships.
Definitely. Reiterate once again that number, 1-800-799-7233, and talk once again about that My Plan app.
So, Mandalin, I think we have one more piece, and this is for the therapeutic intervention. What would you recommend for somebody who is in this situation, beyond the hotline, beyond the application? Let's say they do find a therapist. How would you work with them if any of these types of abuse showed up in real time in a person reaching out for support?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first thing that I would do is make sure that they feel safe, that they feel comfortable opening up to what they need to open up to. And I've noticed people that have been through these situations, the first thing they need is validation. They've been gaslighted so much into thinking, I'm I'm crazy. Maybe it was me. Or they'll apologize for crying. I see that. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm crying. It's so brave to come in and sit on the couch and start talking about your story. So I think the first thing would definitely be validation. You feel what you feel. That's okay. You're scared. You're sad. Okay. You're angry. All right. Let's talk about that. So making them feel like they're in a safe space. There's no judgment. There's no worry about any of that. Just being able to feel comfortable and open first is my first. That's my first goal.
Yeah. Yeah. What you're talking about is really establishing a healthy rapport, so that this, whatever space that you're in, whether it's virtual, whether it's in office, becomes a safe haven. I do think being able to have an opportunity to assess the level and the range and the frequency of the trauma that this person has experienced is really important, because that helps you give them not only a treatment plan, but it also helps you identify what other needs, what other resources they may have need of. And so, even though with counseling, yes, there is um, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we want to make sure that they're stabilized enough to enter into a therapeutic relationship, but also to look at, maybe one-on-one counseling may not be where they start. It may be that they need to go into a residential treatment center. It may be that they need intensive outpatient, just to allow them that space to have more intensive counseling or more intensive support to talk through their story, how we get through trauma, how we get through grief, how we get through abusive situations is we story tell our way through it. And a lot of times telling the story is the most intimidating part. And so the beauty about Alex is that she is a writer. And a part of her growth cycle is that she learns to tell her story and then teaches others to tell their story through writing.
And I love that she finds a group, because I think finding a group with other people that have been abused, helps you become even more validated hearing other people's story, that we're humans, that emotional, that connection is so, so important to the healing process.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think after helping someone feel safe, assessing what they need, if what they have is severe trauma, introducing them to EMDR. They might need EMDR to help their brain process through that trauma.
Yeah. So, Mandalin, you're an EMDR provider. And just for those who are not familiar with the acronym EMDR, it stands for I, movement, desensitization, reprocessing therapy. And it is one of the most impactful psychotherapy modalities out right now. It was originally developed for post-traumatic stress disorder. Over time, over 30 years of research, they have found it to really be useful for really any adverse life experience. When acute stress or trauma is present, a lot of times getting that reactivity under control, that intensity that a person may feel coming out of an abusive cycle, EMDR helps turn the volume down, which means those things that are triggering, those things that hijack the brain, it helps you find a sense of calm in your body, a sense of presence. It also gives you this sense of, what are my next steps? So you get perspective and how to shift for the better. Do you have anything to add on what you've seen with EMDR?
I've seen really powerful transformations with EMDR, and what's beautiful about it is our brain wants to heal itself. It wants to
100%.
process. It wants to process these things, and EMDR allows you a chance to do that when you are in full control. It doesn't change the memories. It doesn't change what happens. It just takes away the reactivity from it, the anxiety. So you can figure out what are those next steps in a way where you're not so activated, fight or flight mode. You are able to emotionally regulate better.
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely want you to be in a space where you can tolerate life and not be overwhelmed by it. And many times, having intensives to be able to support your journey helps you to get there a whole lot faster.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell the people how they can find you.
I'm here at Fundamental Foundations Counseling Center. Just call up and ask for Mandalin Wright. I'm also on Psychology Today and LinkedIn.
Yes. So the number to our office here at the FFC Center is 214-475-0345. But if you need support, we're here to support you. If you have questions, we invite you to put your comments in the feed, how this has been impactful and beneficial for you tonight. We want to thank you for listening to PsychSpeak. You can follow us on Instagram at PsychSpeak Podcast. You can also follow us on Facebook at PsychSpeak Podcast. Thanks for tuning in and have a great day.